When a player wins MVP, normally you'd expect them to be on a great team as well and make it deep into the playoffs. And sometimes they were on a great team, but in one way or another, they couldn't make it out of the first round in that year. In most cases, the winner of the MVP is on a team that's a very high seed. They're usually like a top 2 or top 3 seed in their conference. They have home court advantage, and it should be an easy series in the first round. However, for these players, it was not. How's it going, fellas? My name's Andy, and today we're going to take a look at 5 former MVPs who lost in the first round the same year they won the award. But before we start, I'd like to give a shout out to my sponsors at Hardwood Amino. The Hardwood Amino app is an amazing app for basketball fans. There are polls, trivia questions, a ton of fan-made NBA content, and the quizzes. That's my favorite part about the app. There are tons of quizzes. You could also join or create a public chat room to talk about basketball with fans around the world. To download the app, just go on your iOS or Android device and search the App Store for Hardwood Amino. My username on there is Andy Hoops, so you can follow me and post stuff on my wall with any questions or suggestions or anything else. I'll be answering them throughout the next few days. Thank you to Hardwood Amino for sponsoring this video. Check out the link below to join the community. Alright, let's get started. Number 5, Wes Unseld. Unseld holds the honorary title of being only one of 2 players who won MVP in their rookie seasons, the other one being Wilt Chamberlain. For Unseld, he entered the 1968-69 season with high expectations as the number 2 pick. He joined a Baltimore Bullets team that only won 36 games in the previous season, but now with Unseld, he helped the team improve by 21 wins, finishing the season with a 57-25 record. However, Unseld himself was a strange MVP. Around that time, everyone praised players for putting up ridiculous scoring numbers, but Unseld was the complete opposite of that. He only averaged about 14 points a game, and he was the 5th leading scorer on his own team. However, MVP voters recognized the impact that he had. For a 6'7" center playing in a land of giants, Unseld held his own and became one of the best rebounders and defenders in the league. He had an incredible impact on the team, even though his numbers might not show it. He was kinda like a Ben Wallace type of player. He impacted the game in so many ways besides scoring, and that's why he won MVP. However, in the first round of the playoffs, Unseld and the Baltimore Bullets would get swept by the New York Knicks 4-0. In that series against the Knicks, they were led by Willis Reed, who was the runner-up to Unseld in the MVP voting. But Willis played like the real MVP, averaging over 28 points a game for the series, including a 43-point Game 4 that eliminated the Bullets. With that being said, the Knicks and Bullets were neck and neck during the regular season. The Knicks won 54 games that year, only 3 fewer than the Bullets, so even though it might look bad that Unseld and his team got swept, it was a really tough matchup, and the Knicks were contenders too. Number 4, Russell Westbrook. The 2016-17 season was all about Westbrook. After Kevin Durant left the team, OKC became the Russell Westbrook show. In fact, the entire season became the Westbrook show. He was breaking all kinds of triple-double records. He became the first player since Oscar Robertson in 1962 to average a triple-double for the entire season. And he was the only player to do it while leading the league in scoring at the same time with nearly 32 points a game. He also broke the record for the most triple-doubles in a single season with 42. And that 42nd game was legendary. It came near the end of the season where Westbrook had a ridiculous game. In that game against Denver, he recorded 50 points, 16 rebounds, and 10 assists while hitting the game-winning shot that would eliminate the Nuggets from making the playoffs. Unfortunately, while there's no question about Westbrook's talent and the way he carried the Thunder, they were still playing in a hyper-competitive Western Conference. His team won 47 games that year, but that was only enough to get the 6th seed. Without home court advantage and with the Rockets being the better team led by James Harden, the Thunder would fall in 5 games. Looking back, a lot of fans had mixed opinions of Westbrook's MVP season. Some would say he won strictly because of the triple-double narrative, because winning the MVP after only finishing as the 6th seed is unprecedented. Well, it's not completely unprecedented as you'll see from the rest of the list, but that was the lowest seed in over 30 years. It's a reasonable argument to say he shouldn't have won, but at the same time, Westbrook did have a historic season, something that we'll probably never see again. Well, until the following season where he averaged another triple-double. Nowadays, whenever we see a headline that says, "Oh, this player just recorded a triple-double," it's not even impressive anymore. Just a couple years ago in the 2013-14 season, Lance Stevenson led the league with 5 triple-doubles. So even recently, it used to be very rare. Now, they're everywhere. We used to get excited whenever players got a triple-double, but now it's like, hey, another triple-double, cool. We don't even care. It's not even surprising anymore since Westbrook single-handedly made us indifferent to triple-doubles. Number 3, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem is the only reason I made the title in the first round or before, because as of right now, he's the only MVP to miss the playoffs entirely. In the 1975-76 season, it would be Kareem's first season in Los Angeles. He helped the team win 10 more games than the previous season, but they still only finished with a 40-42 record. Kareem still managed to win MVP, averaging a ridiculous stat line. Nearly 28 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.5 steals, and 4.1 blocks. At this point, he was still by far the best player in the entire league. It wasn't even close. That's why it made sense to give him the MVP, because honestly, it speaks more to how weak the 1970s were. It's arguably the weakest decade in NBA history, which definitely helped Kareem get the award. Bob McAdoo finished right behind him in the voting, and perhaps he deserved it more because his team actually made the playoffs and he was also a great player. Although Kareem was already a champion and on his way to becoming the greatest player of all time, his first couple years in Los Angeles were rough. He continued to dominate and collect his MVP trophies, but it wasn't until the Lakers drafted Magic Johnson where they really took off. Number 2, Moses Malone. Over the years, Moses Malone is one of the most forgotten legends of all time. He's arguably the 6th greatest center ever, yet he rarely ever gets mentioned because he was a quiet guy. In my opinion, he's right behind the big 5 of Kareem, Wilt, Shaq, Hakeem, and Russell. Moses was a 3-time MVP, a champion, a 12-time All-Star, and the greatest offensive rebounder of all time, with some seasons of averaging over 7 offensive boards a game. However, he spent his early years in Houston, and when he won his first 2 MVPs there, he lost in the first round in both years. Back then, Houston played in the Eastern Conference. In the 1979 playoffs, Moses won MVP and led them to 47 wins, but him and his team would lose in the first round 0-2 in a best-of-3 format. 3 years later in 1982, Moses would once again win MVP, but then lost in the first round again, this time to the Seattle Supersonics. His losses in the first round were similar to Westbrook's loss in 2017. In those years, his Rockets were in the middle of the pack and the teams they faced in the first round were just as good, if not better than them. It wasn't until 1983 when Moses joined the 76ers when he started to win in the playoffs because he had a much better team. Those are the years that people recognize whenever fans talk about Moses. His years playing in Philly alongside Julius Erving and a young Charles Barkley. But before that, he was a monster in Houston. He even carried the team to the finals in 1981. However, this infamous feat will most likely not be replicated. Moses was the only player ever to get eliminated in the first round 2 different times in the same year he won MVP. Among all of his rebounding and offensive rebounding records, this is one of his notorious accomplishments. And number 1, Dirk Nowitzki. While every other MVP I talked about lost to teams that had records which were either better than them or around the same, that was not the case with Dirk Nowitzki and the Mavs. Even though the Mavericks struggled with the Warriors all season long, going into their 2007 playoff series, they were still expected to win because they were the best team in the league, with the MVP on their team. Plus, great teams always make adjustments in the playoffs. However, this Warriors team they faced were much different than any other opponent. Don Nelson was the coach of that team, and he coached the Mavs for 8 seasons from 1998 to 2005. Basically, the majority of Dirk Nowitzki's career up until then. He knew everything about Dirk's game because he spent all those years working with him and running plays for him. He knew his weaknesses, so he used that knowledge to his advantage. Dirk has always had trouble with smaller, more physical defenders. He was a tall guy, but in 2007, Dirk was not used to aggressive double teams or taking smaller guys off the dribble, which usually resulted in a turnover. They really bothered him. As a result, Don Nelson threw a bunch of smaller guys on Dirk. Like Matt Barnes, Michael Petrus, Steven Jackson, they all gave him trouble. Additionally, the Mavs were an interesting team that year. They were ranked as the second best offensive team in the league, but they were also ranked 28th in pace. So they were a very slow team that scored mainly in the half court. But the Warriors, on the other hand, they didn't play that game. They were first in the league in pace. Every steal, every rebound turned into a fast break opportunity. If the game slowed down, that only favors the Mavericks, and Nelson knew that. The Warriors won the series in 6 games. That series, by the numbers, was the biggest upset in NBA history. They only won 42 games that season, while the Mavs won 67. The 25-game difference was the biggest upset ever. The aftermath of this series was brutal for Dallas. They spent the next few years continuing to win games and making the playoffs, but they would keep losing in the first or second round until 2011, when Dirk and the Mavs redeemed themselves. And that's all, folks. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.